Your supply chain can make or break your business. With Global Trans, you have the advantage of innovative logistics technology, expansive solutions and carrier network, and a partner committed to your success. Global Trans, freight driven by technology.
Welcome to Off the Supply Chain, a show for shippers. If the supply chain is all about cooperative competition, so is our show. We're bringing you compelling perspectives from 3 market experts. Charles Dudley Warner is known for his famous remark, "Everybody complains about the weather, but nobody does anything about it." Well, today we're talking about what you could do about the weather when it disrupts your supply chain operations. Weather, otherwise known as an act of God, can wreak havoc on supply chains. This week, we'll be debating topics such as, how do you prepare for what can't be avoided? Are some weather events one-offs, or are they becoming trends as climates inevitably change? Now to our host, Chad Prevost.
And joining us today on weather disruption, our 3 panelists, Zach Strickland, the Sultan of Sonar, the Director of Disaster. Welcome to the show, Nick Austin, Chief Meteorologist at FreightWaves, and City Councilman and FreightWaves CTO, Ken Smith. Great to have you guys on. Are you ready to play?
Ready.
Well, ready or not, here we come. The rules of the game. Each guest gets 40 seconds to respond with a 30-second follow-up. We keep score, and the winner is the Supply Chain Champion of the Week. Who will it be this week? When you hear this sound, you have 10 more seconds. When you have this sound, you're out of time. When you hear this sound, you get a point. When you hear this sound, you lose a point. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, July 2019 was the hottest month on record. And this year is shaping up to be the 3rd hottest ever, with record low levels of sea ice and the continuation of an El Nino weather pattern. We could be seeing tremendous volatility this hurricane season. The response to the threat posed by Hurricane Dorian to the southeast coast of the U.S. has soaked up trucking capacity and affected spot rates to and from relevant freight markets. Meanwhile, 2019 has had its share of global and domestic headwinds, weather and otherwise. So guys, as callous as it may sound, is Dorian what the 2019 freight market needed to break out of a recession? Zach, let's start with you.
No, it's not. Dorian wasn't near a significant enough storm to have that kind of impact on the freight market. Back when Harvey and Irma were hitting back in 2017, those were really tremendous storms. Hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage. Dorian wrecked the Bahamas, total catastrophe down there, but it just didn't have the damage capability that the other 2 storms had. So we really need something else to pick us up, to pull us out of a freight recession.
Okay, Nick Austin, what do you think?
Well, I have to agree, if there was more damage in the U.S., it would have been a bigger boost, obviously. The Bahamas are not a territory of the United States, as the storms last year that, the one that hit Puerto Rico, as Zach mentioned, was. So I would have to agree, if it had been a much bigger storm, a Cat 4 or Cat 5, a lot more damage, say like Michael did in Florida last year, it would have been a bigger difference.
Okay, agreeing with Zach, another point for Zach. Okay, was there any damage in the U.S. at all? Ken Smith?
Not enough, Chad, to really make that much of a significant impact in our economy. I mean, it definitely devastated the Bahamas, but when it comes to the United States, to what would really take it to pick up and make a significant impact in freight is going to be an ongoing, a long-term situation here in the United States, where we're not just tying up freight for a short period of time, but it's actually going to be extensive and ongoing, and actually pulling either from the other coast as well, not just from the area around where it was affected.
Okay, well, of course, we are entering into what they call hurricane season. The oceans are very hot. There's a prospect of a lot more of these happening. And also some are even arguing that we are not even in a freight recession anymore, that we've broken out of it. What do you say to that, Ken?
I sure hope so, but it depends on the indicators you look at. In some cases, yeah, it looks like, oh, we're definitely going into a recession. And then we find other indicators where the economy seems hot. So it's one of those things where it depends on which one of those factors you're really looking at and which one you're going to give the most weight to as to whether we're breaking out or not.
Okay, what do you think, Nick?
I think we're definitely not done with hurricane season. Not just on the calendar, it doesn't actually end until November 30th. But something that I do need to mention is that El Nino is actually over already. A lot of people don't realize that. We were in El Nino, but it's done. And El Nino actually suppresses hurricane activity overall.
Corrected.
But because the El Nino is over now and certain other things are coming into play, and we're right near the typical, historical peak of the season, it's possible that we could see a landfalling hurricane in the United States that might be stronger.
So what you're saying is there's
Dorian.
another good tragedy we're not going to let go to waste. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
It's possible, yes.
All right.
What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, we're at the peak of hurricane season about here in a week or so, and I think that leaves the back half of the hurricane season still left to go. There's so much more volatility available. We still have another full month of October. Some of the worst hurricanes in history have happened in October. The oceans are still super warm. There's plenty of time left. In terms of the freight recession, yeah, you could argue that it's pretty much over already. We still have a lot of volume pushing through the system right now, so the demand side is there. It's looking stronger.
Are you seeing the volatility though because of hurricanes? Do you really think
we're not seeing the volatility from the hurricane?
But part of the question too was, are we just out of the freight recession regardless of hurricanes?
We have seen some signs that we are out of the freight recession in general and optimistic going into the fourth quarter because that's super retail heavy. The hurricanes also have big potential in October.
Okay, that is fantastic stuff from our panelists. And after round number 1, it is Zach with 7, Nick with 4, and Ken with 3. From spring into summer, the Farm Belt economy was devastated by the melting of record-setting snowfall and relentless rains. This caused the closure of railroads and highways, all dramatically limiting the amount of crops sent to market. Barges by the hundreds were tied up carrying corn and soybeans. At one point, almost 300 barges were held at 2 locks along the Mississippi. Estimates are 3 months of missed river traffic. With old crops in the way of new ones, it's yet another stress for farmers. What is the long-term impact of the extensive flooding of these waterways? Let's start with none other than Chief Meteorologist Nick Austin on this.
Well, I think the long-term impact, when you have flooding that was that bad in the Midwest, that lasted for that long, it's not just the stuff that was planted early in the year. It's crops that were supposed to come up this fall, even trying to plant this fall for things to come up next. It's the long-term effects because the integrity of the soil is compromised when you have flooding that is that bad. And that's why it's going to possibly have long-term effects on what can be planted in the future, possibly on prices too, that we pay for our food at the supermarkets and at stores.
What do you think, Ken Smith?
So I think there's significant long-term effects. It's not just what we can plant later and the damage to the soil, as Nick pointed out, but it's also the amount of capacity that we have out there on barges and everything else. You're talking about perishables. So when they're sitting on those barges, is it all going to go bad? And now we've just lost the capacity and we've lost the product as well. So you've got new product that you got to get to market somehow. You don't have the capacity to get it there. So you got new product going bad while the old product's going bad, trying to get down where it needs to be delivered. So it's a long-lasting impact on new crops being planted for the future, as well as current crops going bad.
Zach?
Yeah, so I don't think that it had any significant impact to capacity. I think really what it did was it just ruined a bunch of crops, wrecked the soil, as Nick said, and now they're going to have another couple of growing seasons before they are able to get back to where they were before. This is not going to go away just over one season. We've got the winter coming up. That means they can't really do anything with that. And the supply chain disruption itself is going to have significant impacts moving into the future. They're going to have to figure out a way. The rails failed, essentially. Bridges were threatened. They're going to have to redesign their supply chain to figure out how to avoid this in the future because flooding rains are going to continue to happen in the area.
Well, that kind of answers my follow-up question, which is how does one respond to flooding of this kind? It's so extensive. Do you just hope for the best and deal with it as it comes? I mean, I think that's one of the big questions we're asking as we're talking about weather and disruption is how can you prepare for these acts of God?
So you have to change where you source it. So instead of just sourcing it all in that one area, you're gonna have to move maybe further north. You can hedge, you can do things like that to avoid some financial losses. But at the same time, like there's no way you're gonna be able to control the weather. And flooding on the Mississippi is not something new. It happens all the time. There's not any way you can get around that. So you're gonna have to figure out a way to diversify your supplies.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, what do you think about that? What can we do to prepare for acts of God?
I agree. As far as flooding, I mean, better levees? I have no idea. I mean, historic flooding like that kind of major flooding is difficult to prepare for and to get ready for it at a time.
How often?
Well, on some areas along the Mississippi River in Missouri, it was worse than the major floods back in '93. So, I mean, it was equal or worse to that flooding in some spots. I'm not a farmer, but for just the farmers and the growers out there, I don't know how they can prepare. I mean, I don't think you can necessarily prepare crop or livestock to survive something like that. It's getting your property ready.
What do you think, Ken Smith? Is there nothing that we can do, or is there something? Are we hedging? What are we doing?
Well, you've got to do something. I think nothing is definitely the wrong answer. Continuing to do what we've always done is what gets us in this situation every single time, and then we continue to ask the question, well, is there something we can do? You have to start looking at alternate modes to get your product. I don't know that you can source it from a different place necessarily, depending on what it is. If we're talking about produce, there's certain areas of the country that produce a certain type of produce in the volumes that you need. So you have to start looking at ways that you can get that to market or to your destination easier, better, and account for some of these cases when we have issues like with the flooding.
Okay, fantastic. After round 2, Zach still maintaining his lead with 12, Nick with 7, and Ken on the comeback trail with 10. Logistics operations don't stop after a major storm passes. In fact, you could say that is when things get started. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2018, more than 10,000 containers of important supplies just sat at the San Juan ports. Only 20% of truck drivers had reported back to work after Maria, which made for a significant distribution backlog. Not only was there a lack of capacity, but many roads were impassable. Fast forward to today, after the deadly destruction in the Bahamas after Dorian, we could have a repeat of Puerto Rico. What are the logistics of dealing with the aftermath of a disaster? Let's start with Ken Smith this time.
Thank you, Chad. So one of the things that we've failed to discuss in a lot of these cases is what are we going to do about just freight in general? You don't really take into account the infrastructure and what's required to get freight from A to B. It's, a river, that's infrastructure, but then what about the rest? What about your roads? What about your bridges? What about your sewers? What about things of that nature that we have to, as a city, as a state, as a country, we have to address those types of issues because it doesn't matter how good you may have your supply chain built out. Doesn't matter how many processes and how many options you have to deliver goods. If you don't have good rails, good roads, open rivers, if you don't have those types of things in place and a way to respond to those types of critical events, you're still going to have a problem and people are going to have that issue. So it's not something that companies, carriers can solve themselves. They need to, of course, diversify on what they've got in their supply chain, but we're relying on governments to make sure that we've got the infrastructure in place to make sure we can get there.
Wow, what do you think, Zach?
Yeah, no, when the natural disaster occurs, like the whole infrastructure is wrecked. So what people need to do is just make sure that they know they have disaster supplies on hand, everything ready to go, because you can't rely on any of those things that Ken just talked about. You'd have the waterways are probably full of sewage. There's fires. If anybody looked at Katrina damage, there were fires, there were floods everywhere. Logistics of it involve trucks going to a staging area, and they set up way outside of the disaster zones. So what that means is that they have to figure out a way to wait for everybody to clean out all the mess and assess the damage first before they're able to even get in there. So they really are at the mercy of the people that are going into the disaster areas and cleaning that up and making a way for them to come in. So all these supplies sit out on the outside of the perimeter in a safe area, and it may take days, weeks, months even for them to even get in there.
Yes, as we have heard has happened in numerous cases. Nick, what do you think?
Days or weeks, because not just problems with sewage, all the other stuff, cleaning up down power lines. There are going to be live wires out there, and so that has to be taken care of. Trees down everywhere, just roads blocked. So before any freight or even release supplies can get in there, and there might be people in there that need to be rescued, which is why it's so important when people realize and when they know for days in advance that a major hurricane might be hitting their area, get out. When they tell you to evacuate, do it, because there's already going to be enough work to do just cleaning up the area. But and I hate to sound mean, but if the crews have to spend time rescuing people who should not have been there, who could have left, that just adds to the problem, and it adds to more time. Time that they could have been bringing relief in. So.
You can hear the emotional appeal that Nick is making. You've
I
probably told many people many times these things over the years. So I mean, and it begs the question, like, is the planning like that has to go into the coordination logistics-wise for the aftermath of a disaster? Is there more to that than even preparing in advance, Nick? What do you think?
I think there is, just because of all the time it takes to clean up the mess to begin with, as we mentioned. So, I mean, I don't really know if it's equal time cleaning up as to preparing beforehand, because you do have to stage outside the areas. You have to get the release supplies ready, and that could take at least a few days.
What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, there's only so much you can do, especially when you have no idea. I mean,
in advance or during?
Days in advance. Days in advance.
Yeah.
You see a storm coming, like with Dorian, for instance. It came in, they had it forecast going right over the center of Florida. It didn't go right over Florida. Right. So that costs a lot of money for people to divert supplies over to that area. And now once it turns north, literally a day later, they have to go and change where they're setting up all the supplies, and they get ready for it that way. So, I mean, the costs going in front of it are significant, so they can't just simply say, well, we know exactly what's going to happen this time, plan for it, and move on.
So perhaps the aftermath is a bigger deal. I don't know. What do you think, Ken?
Well, I mean, we're not talking days in advance. We're talking years in advance in order to have the communications in place to reach out to all the different facilities. And it's not just for supplies. It's for electrical trucks. It's for construction trucks that we see coming down from the north in droves to be ready ahead of time. You have to plan that out years in advance so that your communications are in place in order to be able to reach out those couple of days in advance and say, hey guys, this is it, here's the drill, we worked on it, we need you getting down here. But then I think there's more time in those few days that we need to be worrying about how we're going to keep those supplies fresh, how we're going to have them ready to go, because we have no idea the impact and how massive the storm may be.
And after 3 rounds, we have Zach with 18, Nick with 12, and Ken with 19. A slight lead leading in to the lightning round, where we're playing big deal, little deal. In the immediate aftermath of such events, supply chains play a critical role in disaster relief and emergency search and rescue operations. Big deal or little deal? Why or why not, Zach?
Big deal, obviously. I mean, the supply chain being set up appropriately means that they can get in faster with supplies, saving lives, making sure that everything is appropriately set up for the next people to come in.
Saving lives.
Saving lives, that's a big deal. I mean, you can't argue with that. But also just making sure that, everything isn't disrupted anymore. I mean, the disruption to the natural disaster event itself causes disruption down the line. So in the middle of Florida, if all the infrastructure is broken, then people can't get to Miami, for instance.
What do you think, Nick?
It's obviously a big deal. If I said little deal, how would that make me look?
Horrible person.
But it wouldn't be an honest answer either. No, it's definitely a big deal. I mean, and that also depends on the level of destruction, of course, with the storm, whether it's a major hurricane, a lesser one. But any way you look at it, the supply chains are definitely important when it comes to any kind of disaster relief.
Okay,
hurricane
Ken.
or otherwise.
It's a big deal, Chad. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons. It's not just the supply chain and getting relief down there, right? So we've got Coast Guard involved, we got military involved, we got all these people involved that are down there doing the saving lives part. We've got to make sure that as soon as the areas are cleared, as soon as we can get in, that those supply chains are ready to go. So of course it's an absolute big deal. Again, we have to know years in advance how to prep, how to be ready, so that 2-day phone call, everybody's immediately moving and not trying to figure out how to get there, and that's part of the supply chain plan.
Brazilian farmers set fire to portions of the Amazon rainforest near their farms in early September. These fires were initially reported to be a result of climate change. However, like most fires that occur in the Amazon, they were man-made. Big deal or little deal? Why or why not? Nick Austin.
Well, I don't, maybe not a big deal to the entire world. I think there were some overzealous reporting of some of the climate effects of the fires themselves, because the Amazon, it is such a biodiverse area. But certainly to the local biodiversity and
so that's a little
the
deal
local
then?
ecosystem, it's a big deal. Okay. Globally, I don't think it's as huge a deal.
Little deal then.
Little deal, yeah.
Oh, okay. Ken Smith.
Chad, I'm going little deal on this one, and I know it doesn't
Okay.
sound super popular to do it, and that's mainly because all we hear about is that the Amazon provides 20% of the oxygen for the world, and nobody wants that destruction. They're not thinking about the biodiversity, the indigenous people, the farmers for that matter that have a right to make a living. We clear cut a lot in the United States, Chad, to have farms at some point in time, and nobody said anything then.
About a century and a half ago might be the reason why,
Right.
though. Zach.
You're making it easy for me. Big deal. I mean, I get to save the planet and save the trees at the same time. It's a big deal because they don't have the infrastructure in place in Brazil right now. They don't care that they're burning significant amount of acreage and they're not doing anything about it. Like for instance, in America, we started planting trees. We have associations that are there to replenish our forests. We're actually replacing faster than we're cutting down in America. And they don't have that in Brazil.
Wow, who
Well, we
knew?
know now. But we're not saving the planet.
I just did.
You did that.
For our final question in our lightning round, big deal or little deal? FreightWaves opens up free sonar access in the midst of Hurricane Dorian. Big deal or little deal? Why or why not? Ken Smith.
I'm going with big deal, Chad. I mean, we just talked about how important it is for supply chains to be ready and be informed and to know where they can get, how they can get there, and all that information is what is provided by sonar. I think it's a very big deal if people take advantage of it.
Okay, Zach.
Big deal. The more information you have, the faster you can respond and more accurately. So efficiency on how you appropriately act to get those supplies in there. Sonar helps.
Nick.
For all those reasons, big deal. So why not open it up to folks right now who or at least at the time didn't have access, so that they could get the information? Exactly. Why not? Big deal.
Big deal. Well, this has been a big deal, and it's been quite the competition. Zach Strickland, 23. Nick Austin, 14. Ken Smith, 25. Congratulations! You are our Off the Supply Chain Champion of the Week. What are you going to do with your week?
I don't know. I think I'm going to go back to work, Chad.
Quite the honor it is.
That is all for this week's episode of Off the Supply Chain. Join us next week as multimedia specialist Tim Dooner, market expert Zach Strickland, and associate editor John Paul Hampstead have a lively discussion about automation and how it's transforming the industry.
Global Trans offers a full suite of solutions around logistics, supply chain, and transportation.
Technology is what we do. Global Trans is bringing the trucking industry into the 21st century. From a small family-run business to now almost $1 billion company. We did that all together as a team, and we're bringing the people, processes, and software together.
When I joined the company 3 years ago, I was attracted to the high growth and fast-paced environment, but I'm proud to say that we still have that nimble entrepreneurial spirit.
As a leader in logistics technology, our platform allows us to serve any market, any mode, at any time. We're at the forefront of the logistics market.
Our teams will always find a way to adapt to the best possible solution to service our customers.
Our team is here for our customers, literally 24/7 by 365, because we need to be, and we'll get it done anytime, anywhere. We have a very competitive team, and that's what we really enjoy doing.
Our mantra is simple: we are the future of freight.